The stagecoach rattled to a stop, kicking up a cloud of red dust that clung to the air like a stubborn memory. Eleanor Grayson stepped down her boots, sinking into the sun-baked earth of Willow Creek, a speck of a town nestled between the rolling green hills and the silver ribbon of the Little Fork River. The air smelled of pine and promise, but her heart thudded with a weight heavier than the trunk she dragged behind her. She'd come all this way across 3 states through mud and misery for a man who'd promised her a future, a husband, a home. But as she scanned the sparse crowd at the station, no one stepped forward to claim her. Eleanor was no stranger to sidelong glances. At 30, she was sturdy and broad, her frame carrying more than the world deemed ladylike. Her chestnut curls framed a face that was kind but plain, with eyes that held a quiet fire. Back in Boston, she'd endured the whispers too heavy, too homely, too bold, and she'd borne them with a spine of steel. But here in this new land, she dared to hope for something different. A letter from Thomas Hargrove, a farmer in Willow Creek, had sparked that hope. His words were plain but kind, describing a life of honest work and shared dreams. He'd proposed marriage sight unseen through a mail-order arrangement. She'd said yes. Now standing under the relentless midday sun, Eleanor felt the sting of doubt. A man in a crisp suit approached, his mustache twitching as he took her in. "You, Miss Grayson?" he asked, his voice clipped. "I am," she said, squaring her shoulders. He frowned, his eyes raking over her, with a disappointment he didn't bother to hide. "I'm Thomas Hargrove. I expected someone different." The words landed like a slap. "I don't think this'll work out, ma'am. I'm sorry." The crowd murmured their whispers, sharp as thorns. Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "You wrote to me of a partnership, Mr. Hargrove, of respect and shared labor. Was that a lie?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "No, but appearances matter in a town like this. I need a wife who fits." He tipped his hat and turned away, leaving her standing alone. The humiliation could have broken her, but Eleanor had faced worse. She'd grown up in a world that judged her for her size, her sharp tongue, her refusal to shrink herself. She'd come to Willow Creek to build something new, and no man's rejection would stop her. Clutching her trunk, she marched toward the town's only inn, the scent of wild honeysuckle guiding her steps. At the inn, a woman with gray-streaked hair and a warm smile introduced herself as Clara, the innkeeper. "Heard what happened, dear," she said, pouring Eleanor a cup of tea. "Hargrove's a fool, but you've got grit. You'll find your place here." Eleanor sipped the tea, its warmth steadying her. "I didn't come for pity, Clara. I came for a life." Clara's eyes twinkled. "Then you'll need to meet folks who see beyond the surface. Like Caleb Morrow." The name stirred curiosity. Caleb, Clara explained, was a widower who ran a sprawling farm just outside town. He was kind, respected, but kept to himself since losing his wife years ago. "He's not one for nonsense," Clara said, "and he's got no patience for folks like Hargrove." That evening, Eleanor wandered to the edge of town where the river glittered under the fading light. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp moss and cedar. She let herself dream not of a man, but of a life where she could be herself unapologetically. As she stood there, a figure approached, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and sorrow. He tipped his hat, his eyes meeting hers without judgment. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm Caleb Morrow. Clara said you might need a friend in Willow Creek." Eleanor's heart skipped, not from romance, but from the simple kindness in his gaze. For the first time that day, she felt seen. Could this man, this place, be the start of something real? Or would Willow Creek prove as unforgiving as the world she'd left behind? The river's gentle rush filled the silence as Eleanor stood face to face with Caleb Morrow, his hat casting a shadow across his weathered features. The last rays of sunlight painted the hills gold, and the air carried a faint sweetness of wildflowers, mingling with the earthy scent of the nearby fields. Her heart still stung from Thomas Hargrove's rejection, but Caleb's steady gaze held no trace of pity or scorn. It was disarming, and Eleanor wasn't sure she trusted it. "You don't owe me kindness, Mr. Morrow," she said, her voice firm despite the ache in her chest. "I'm not here to be anyone's charity case." Caleb's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Clara didn't send me to offer charity, Miss Grayson. She said you've got fire in you. I reckon a woman like that doesn't need pity, she needs a chance." His words caught her off guard, stirring something she hadn't felt in years, the faint hope of being understood. But hope was a dangerous thing, and Eleanor had learned to guard hers closely. She nodded, keeping her expression guarded. A chance is all I'm after. I came to Willow Creek to build a life, not to chase dreams that don't hold up. Caleb gestured toward the path leading back to town. Walk with me. I'll show you the lay of the land. Willow Creek's small, but it's got its share of heart and its share of fools. She hesitated, then fell into step beside him. The town unfolded before them, wooden storefronts weathered by time, a church with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left, and fields stretching toward the horizon like a quilt stitched by giants. Caleb pointed out the general store, the blacksmith, and the schoolhouse, where children's laughter spilled out even at dusk. His voice was steady, unhurried, painting a picture of a community that was both tight-knit and wary of outsiders. Folks here are good mostly, he said, pausing by a fence overlooking his farm, but they hold tight to their ways. Hargrove's not the only one who thinks appearances make the person. Eleanor's jaw tightened. I've heard that tune my whole life. Too big, too plain, too much. I thought a new place might sing a different song. Caleb turned to her, his eyes searching. It can, but it takes time, and maybe a few folks willing to listen to your song instead of their own. Their walk was interrupted by a sharp voice calling from the road. Caleb Morrow, you old hermit, what's this about you playing guide? A woman approached, her blonde hair pinned elegantly, her dress a shade of blue that caught the fading light. She was everything Eleanor wasn't, petite, polished with a smile that promised charm but hinted at calculation. And who's this? She asked, her eyes flicking over Eleanor with a quick, dismissive glance. Miss Eleanor Grayson, meet Abigail Turner. Caleb said, his tone neutral. Abigail's family owns the mill. She's a friend from way back. Abigail's smile didn't reach her eyes. Oh, you're the one Thomas sent packing. Poor dear. This town's not kind to strangers who don't fit the mold. Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides, but she kept her voice even. I don't need kindness, Miss Turner. I need work and a roof. I'll earn both. Abigail laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. Bold words. But Willow Creek's particular about its women. Isn't that right, Caleb? She touched his arm, a gesture too familiar for Eleanor's liking. Caleb stepped back, his expression unreadable. Eleanor's got as much right to make her place here as anyone. Let's not start trouble where there's none, Abigail. The tension hung thick as the evening mist rolling in from the river. Eleanor felt the weight of Abigail's judgment, a mirror of the rejection she'd faced hours earlier. But Caleb's quiet defense steadied her like a hand catching her before a fall. As Abigail sauntered off, her parting glance promised more than just idle gossip. Caleb walked Eleanor back to the inn, the crickets now singing in the twilight. Don't mind Abigail, he said. She's got her own ideas about how things ought to be. But you've got a chance to show this town who you are. Start tomorrow, come by the farm. I could use help with the harvest, and I pay fair. Eleanor studied him, searching for a catch. There was none, only a man who seemed to see her as she was not, as she wasn't. I'll be there, she said, her voice soft but resolute. As she climbed the inn stairs, the scent of wood smoke and lavender lingered, and she wondered if Willow Creek might yet hold a place for her. But with Abigail's shadow looming, would her chance at a new life come at a cost? The morning sun spilled over Willow Creek like honey gilding the fields and casting long shadows from the oaks that lined Caleb Morrow's farm. Eleanor woke to the scent of fresh bread wafting from Clara's kitchen, her resolve hardened by the promise of work. She'd come to this town for a new beginning, and if Thomas Hargrove's rejection had bruised her, Caleb's offer was a lifeline. Dressed in a simple cotton dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon, she set out for the farm. The crunch of gravel under her boots, a steady rhythm to her thoughts. Caleb's land was a patchwork of green and gold acres of wheat swaying in the breeze. Apple orchards heavy with fruit in a barn weathered but sturdy. The air hummed with the buzz of bees and the distant lowing of cattle. Eleanor found Caleb near the barn, his sleeves rolled up as he repaired a fence. His hands moved with quiet confidence, and when he saw her, he nodded as if her arrival was the most natural thing in the world. Morning, Miss Grayson, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Ready to get your hands dirty, dirtier than they've ever been, she replied, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Show me what needs doing. He handed her a pair of gloves and led her to the orchard, where baskets waited to be filled. The work was hard, reaching for apples, hauling baskets, climbing ladders that creaked under her weight, but Eleanor reveled in it. Each fruit she picked felt like a small victory, a claim on this new life. Caleb worked alongside her, his presence steady but not overbearing. He didn't hover or coddle, and she respected him for it. As they worked, he shared bits of his story, his voice low against the rustle of leaves. "Lost my wife, Sarah, 3 years back," he said, his eyes fixed on a gnarled tree. Fever took her fast. "Left me with this farm and a hole I didn't think could mend." He paused, glancing at her. "You ever lose something that made you question everything?" Eleanor thought of her mother, who taught her to hold her head high despite the world's judgment, only to pass when Eleanor was barely grown. "Yes," she said softly, "but I learned you keep going. You build something new even if it's just one step at a time." Caleb nodded, a flicker of understanding passing between them. For a moment, the orchard felt like a world apart, where words didn't need to be loud to carry weight. Their rhythm was broken by the clatter of hooves. Abigail Turner rode up on a sleek mare, her dress pristine, despite the dust of the road. "Caleb, you're working this poor woman like a mule," she called, her tone teasing but sharp. "Surely you don't expect her to keep up with farmhands." Eleanor set down her basket, her voice calm but edged. "I'm keeping up just fine, Miss Turner. Work suits me better than gossip." Abigail's smile tightened. "Oh, I'm sure. But Willow Creek's particular about its womenfolk. We value refinement." She glanced at Caleb as if expecting him to agree. Caleb's jaw set. "Refinement's overrated when it comes with a mean streak, Abigail. Eleanor's earning her keep, same as anyone." Abigail's eyes narrowed, but she turned her horse with a flourish. "We'll see how long that lasts," she said, her voice dripping with honeyed venom before she rode off. Eleanor's hands trembled as she returned to the apples, not from fear, but from the fire of being seen as less again. Caleb noticed, his voice gentle. "She's got no claim on you, Eleanor. Or on me. Her family's got money, but that doesn't buy truth." The day wore on, and as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of peach and lavender, Eleanor felt a shift. The work, the land, Caleb's quiet respect, it was a foundation she could build on. Clara had been right, this town had heart, but it also had claws. Abigail's words echoed the rejection Eleanor had faced before. Yet here, with dirt under her nails, and a man who saw her worth, she felt a spark of belonging. As they finished, Caleb handed her a small sack of coins. "First day's wages," he said. "You earned it." She took it, the weight of it grounding her. "Thank you, Caleb, for the work and the chance." He tipped his hat, his eyes warm. Plenty more where that came from. Tomorrow, she promised, her heart lighter as she walked back to town, the scent of apples clinging to her skin. But as she passed the general store, she caught whispers, Abigail's voice spreading word of the unsuitable newcomer. Would Eleanor's strength be enough to weather the storm of gossip that was brewing? The dawn broke over Willow Creek with a chill that nipped at Eleanor's skin as she stepped out of the inn, the scent of dew-soaked grass sharp in the air. Her muscles ached from yesterday's work in Caleb's orchard, but the soreness was a badge of pride, proof she could carve her place in this town. She pulled her shawl tighter, her breath clouding in the crisp morning, and headed toward the farm. The memory of Abigail's barbed words lingered like a bruise, but Eleanor had faced worse than a sharp-tongued socialite. Today she'd prove her worth again, not just to Caleb, but to herself. The town was waking, its streets alive with the clatter of wagons and the low hum of voices. As she passed the general store, a cluster of women paused their chatter, their eyes trailing her like hawks. One whispered to another, the word Hargrove catching on the breeze. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Abigail's gossip had spread, painting her as the rejected bride unfit for Willow Creek standards. She lifted her chin, refusing to let their stares dim her purpose. Let them talk. She'd come here to build, not to bend. At the farm, Caleb was waiting by the barn, a plow hitched to a pair of sturdy horses. His smile was small but genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Morning, Eleanor. Thought we'd tackle the wheat field today. Ever handled a plow?" She laughed, the sound surprising her. "Not yet, but I'm a quick study. Show me the ropes." He did, guiding her hands on the plow's handles, his touch brief but steady. The work was grueling, the earth resisting each push, but Eleanor leaned into it, her body finding a rhythm. Caleb worked beside her, his strength quiet but sure, and their shared effort felt like a conversation without words. The field stretched wide, framed by mountains that glowed purple in the morning light, and the air smelled of turned soil and possibility. As they paused for water, Caleb pointed to a small cabin at the field's edge. "That's where Sarah and I started," he said, his voice soft. "Built it with our hands. She loved this land even when it fought us." His gaze drifted heavy with memory. Eleanor hesitated, then asked, "What was she like? Kind? Stubborn? Never backed down from a challenge?" He glanced at her, a faint smile breaking through. "Reminds me of someone." Her cheeks warmed, but before she could respond, a shadow fell across the field. Thomas Hargrove rode up his suit as crisp as the day he'd rejected her. "Morrow," he called, ignoring Eleanor. "Heard you're hiring help. Didn't think you'd stoop to charity." Caleb's eyes hardened. "Eleanor's no charity case, Hargrove. She works harder than most men I know. You'd do well to judge a person by their grit, not your mirror." Thomas smirked, his gaze flicking to Eleanor. "Grit's fine for a farmhand, but a wife. This town expects more. You know that, Morrow." He tipped his hat, a mockery of courtesy, and rode off. Eleanor's hands tightened on the plow, her voice low. "He's not wrong about the town. I hear the whispers. They think I don't belong." Caleb stepped closer, his presence a steady anchor. "They're wrong. You're proving it every day you show up. Let them talk. They'll tire of it when they see who you are." His words were a balm, but the doubt lingered. That afternoon, Clara invited Eleanor to a town sewing circle, a chance to meet the women of Willow Creek. "They're not all like Abigail," Clara said, her eyes kind. "Give them a chance to know you." The sewing circle met in the church basement, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and old hymnals. Eleanor sat quietly, her needle moving with practiced ease, but the women's glances were cautious, their conversations stilted. Abigail was there, her voice bright as she recounted Thomas's noble decision to seek a proper bride. The words cut, but Eleanor kept her focus on her stitches, each one a small act of defiance. Then a young woman, Mary, spoke up, her voice timid but warm. "Miss Grayson Clara says you're working at Caleb's farm. That's brave, coming all this way to start over." Eleanor met her eyes grateful. "It's not bravery, Mary. It's necessity. I want a life that's mine, not one someone else decides for me." Mary smiled, and a few others nodded, their reserve softening. Abigail's lips pursed, but she said nothing. As Eleanor left the church, the sunset painted the sky in the streaks of crimson, and she felt a flicker of hope. She'd won a small victory today, but Abigail's influence loomed large, and Thomas's words echoed in her mind. Could she truly change Willow Creek's heart, or would their judgment bury her dreams? The air in Willow Creek carried the sharp tang of autumn as Eleanor trudged toward Caleb's farm, the dawn sky streaked with clouds like spilled ink. Her hands were calloused now, her body stronger from weeks of labor, but her heart bore a new weight. The sewing circle had given her a glimpse of acceptance, yet Abigail's influence and the town's whispers clung to her like damp wool. She'd come to build a life, but each step felt like a battle against a current determined to sweep her away. At the farm, Caleb was splitting wood, his axe falling with a rhythm that matched the pulse of the land. The scent of pine and earth surrounded them, and the sight of him, steady, unyielding, eased the knot in her chest. He paused when he saw her, his breath clouding in the cool air. "You're early," he said, a faint grin softening his features. "Eager to beat the frost?" "Eager to keep my hands busy," she replied, tying an apron over her dress. Idle minds let the doubts creep in. He studied her, his eyes sharp but kind. "Town still talking?" She nodded, picking up a rake to clear leaves from the barn's entrance. "They're warming to me, some of them. Mary's kind and a few others are coming around. But Abigail's got a tongue like a whip, and Thomas stirs the pot. They think I'm a curiosity, not a neighbor." Caleb set down his axe, leaning against the barn. "They're scared of what's different. Always have been. But you're not here to fit their mold, Eleanor. You're here to make your own." His words stirred something deep, a spark of defiance she'd nearly forgotten. They worked side by side that morning, tending to the livestock and repairing a fence battered by last week's storm. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on small things, the way the river sparkled at dusk, the taste of Clara's apple pie, the stubborn goat that kept escaping its pen. With each shared laugh, Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't expected, a connection rooted not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments. Midday brought an unexpected visitor, Mary, the young woman from the sewing circle, her cheeks flushed from the walk. She carried a basket of preserves, her smile shy but genuine. "Thought you might like these, Miss Grayson," she said. "My mom makes the best peach jam in Willow Creek." Eleanor took the basket touched. "That's kind of you, Mary. Call me Eleanor, please." Mary glanced at Caleb, then back to Eleanor. "I heard Abigail talking at the store. She's saying you're, well, not suited for Caleb's farm, or for him." Her voice dropped hesitant. "I don't believe her, but she's got sway with the younger women." Caleb's jaw tightened, but Eleanor spoke first, her voice steady. "Abigail can say what she likes. I'm here to work, not to win a popularity contest. And Caleb's been nothing but fair." Mary nodded, emboldened. "I think you're good for this town, Eleanor. We need folks who don't bow to gossip." She hesitated, then added, "If you ever need a friend, I'm here." The gesture lingered with Eleanor as Mary left a small crack in the wall of judgment she'd faced, but the peace was short-lived. As she and Caleb returned to the fields, a figure approached on horseback. Abigail, her posture perfect, her eyes gleaming with purpose. She dismounted with a grace that made Eleanor feel every inch of her own sturdy frame. "Caleb, I need a word," Abigail said, her voice sweet but commanding. "Alone." Caleb crossed his arms. "Anything you've got to say can be said in front of Eleanor. She's part of this farm now." Abigail's smile faltered, but she pressed on. "I'm hosting a harvest dance next week, and the town expects you there. As a respected man, you need a proper partner." Her gaze flicked to Eleanor, dismissive. "Someone who reflects Willow Creek's values." Eleanor's chest tightened, but she held her ground. "If you mean someone who judges others by their heart and not their dress size, I'm not sure you fit that bill, Miss Turner." Abigail's eyes flashed, but Caleb stepped forward, his voice low and firm. "Eleanor's right. This town's values need shaking up, and she's doing just that. I'll be at the dance, Abigail, but I'll choose my own company." Abigail mounted her horse, her parting words sharp. "Choose wisely, Caleb. The town's watching." As she rode off, the air felt heavier, charged with the promise of conflict. Eleanor turned to Caleb, her voice soft but steady. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, meeting her eyes. "You're worth standing up for." As they returned to work, the sun climbing higher, Eleanor felt a shift. Caleb's support, Mary's kindness. These were roots taking hold in Willow Creek's rocky soil. But with Abigail's challenge looming, the harvest dance would be more than a celebration. It would be a test. Could she face the town's scrutiny and hold her head high? The harvest moon hung low over Willow Creek, bathing the town in a silver glow that turned the Little Fork River into a shimmering mirror. Eleanor stood before the cracked mirror in her room, at the end smoothing the folds of her best dress, a deep green muslin that hugged her curves but felt like armor. The harvest dance was tonight, and Abigail's challenge echoed in her mind. The town would be watching, judging, and Eleanor knew her presence would stir whispers. But Caleb's words, "You're worth standing up for," burned brighter than her doubts. She pinned her curls with care, took a deep breath, and stepped into the night, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. The dance was held in the town's barn, its rafters strung with lanterns that cast a warm glow over the crowd. Fiddles sang and laughter mingled with the clink of cider mugs. Eleanor paused at the entrance, her heart pounding. Faces turned, some curious, others guarded. She spotted Mary waving her over a beacon of warmth in the sea of stairs. "You look lovely, Eleanor," Mary said, her eyes bright. "That dress suits you." Eleanor managed a smile. "It's no silk gown, but it's mine. Thank you for being here, Mary." As they chatted, Caleb entered, his broad frame filling the doorway. He wore a simple jacket, his hair tamed, but still curling at the edges. His eyes found Eleanor's, and he crossed the room with a purpose that silenced the nearby whispers. "Evening, Eleanor," he said, his voice warm. "Care to join me for a dance?" Her breath caught. She hadn't danced in years, not since the pitying glances of Boston's ballrooms had driven her away. "I'm not much for dancing, Caleb. I'd rather not make a spectacle." He leaned closer, his voice low. "You're no spectacle. You're a woman who deserves to enjoy herself. One dance. I'll lead." Before she could protest, he offered his hand, and she took it, his calloused palm steady against hers. The fiddle struck up a lively reel, and Caleb guided her to the floor. She was clumsy at first, her steps hesitant, but his grip was sure, his smile encouraging. For a moment the world shrank to the rhythm of the music and the warmth of his hand. She felt seen, not as too big or too plain, but as Eleanor, whole and enough. The moment shattered when Abigail swept onto the floor, her silk dress catching the light like a flame. She danced with Thomas Hargrove, her movements graceful, her laughter calculated to draw eyes. When the song ended, she approached Caleb, her smile sharp. "You're full of surprises tonight, Caleb," she said, ignoring Eleanor. "Surely you'll save a dance for an old friend?" Caleb's expression was polite but firm. "I'm here with Eleanor tonight, Abigail. Maybe another time." Abigail's eyes narrowed, but she turned to the crowd, her voice carrying. "It's wonderful to see everyone enjoying the harvest, though some of us might need a bit robot practice to keep up with the town's expectations." Her words were honey-sweet, but barbed, a reminder of Eleanor's outsider status. The crowd's murmurs grew, and Eleanor felt the weight of their scrutiny like a gust of cold wind cutting through the barn's warmth. She straightened her chin, lifting. "I'm keeping up just fine, Miss Turner," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "I'm here to dance, not to please you." A few gasps rippled through the crowd, but Caleb's hand tightened briefly on hers, a silent anchor. The music shifted to a slower waltz, and Caleb led her away from Abigail's orbit, his steps sure as they moved to the edge of the dance floor. The scent of hay and apple cider lingered in the air, mingling with the faint musk of polished wood. Eleanor's heart still raced, but not from fear. It was the thrill of standing her ground, of feeling Caleb's quiet strength beside her. "You handled that well," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that steadied her. "Abigail's used to getting her way. She doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't bend." Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes searching his. "I'm tired of bending, Caleb. I've done it my whole life, making myself smaller, quieter, to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. I won't do it here." His smile was slow, warm, like the first light of dawn. "Good. Willow Creek needs someone like you, someone who doesn't break." The dance continued, and Eleanor found herself relaxing into the rhythm, her body moving with a grace she hadn't known she possessed. Mary joined them, bringing her brother, a lanky young man named Daniel, who asked Eleanor for the next dance with a shy grin. "Mary says you're the best thing to happen to this town," he said, his sincerity disarming. Eleanor laughed, letting him spin her through the crowd, her green dress catching the lantern light like a forest in bloom. For the first time, she felt not just tolerated, but welcomed, if only by a few. But Abigail wasn't done. As the waltz ended, she gathered a cluster of women near the cider table, her voice carrying just enough to reach Eleanor's ears. "It's sweet, really, how Caleb's taken pity on her," she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "But a man like him needs a wife who can hold her own in society, not just in the fields." Thomas Hargrove stood nearby, nodding, his smug expression a mirror of his earlier rejection. Eleanor's hands clenched, the old wounds of Boston's judgment flaring. She'd heard these words before. Too much, not enough, but here, with Caleb's faith in her and Mary's budding friendship, they stung less. She was about to respond when Mary stepped forward, her voice clear and firm. "Miss Turner, if society means tearing others down to feel better, maybe it's you who doesn't fit. Eleanor's twice the woman you are. She works hard and speaks true." The barn fell silent, the fiddles pausing as heads turned. Abigail's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, her laugh sharp. "Oh, Mary, you're young. You'll learn how things work here." She swept away, her silk skirts rustling, but the damage was done. A few women whispered to each other, their expressions thoughtful rather than hostile. Eleanor caught Clara's eye across the room, the innkeeper's nod, a quiet vote of confidence. As the music resumed, Caleb found her again, his presence like a hearth fire on a cold night. "You're making waves, Eleanor," he said, his tone half teasing, half proud. "Mary's right, you know. You're changing things whether they like it or not." She smiled, her heart lighter. "I'm just being me, Caleb. If that's enough to shake things up, maybe this town's been still too long." They danced again, the world blurring around them, the scent of autumn leaves and lantern oil wrapping them in a cocoon of warmth. But as the night wore on, Eleanor noticed Abigail whispering to Thomas, their glances sharp as knives. The dance had been a victory, a step toward belonging, but Abigail's parting look promised retribution. The town's acceptance was fragile, and Eleanor knew the real test was yet to come. Would her newfound strength and Caleb's support be enough to face the storm brewing on Willow Creek's horizon? The frost had kissed Willow Creek by morning, leaving a delicate sheen on the fields that sparkled like scattered diamonds under the pale sun. Eleanor pulled her shawl tight as she walked to Caleb's farm, the air sharp with the scent of frozen earth and distant chimney smoke. Last night's dance had left her heart buoyant yet wary Mary's defense, and Caleb's unwavering support had kindled a warmth she hadn't known she craved, but Abigail's venomous glances lingered like a storm cloud on the horizon. Eleanor had faced rejection before, but this felt different, personal, as if Abigail saw her not just as an outsider, but as a threat. At the farm, Caleb was loading a wagon with sacks of wheat, his breath clouding in the chill. The sight of him, sleeves rolled up his face, lit by the soft morning light, steadied her. "You're glowing today," he said, tossing a sack onto the wagon with a grin. "Dance got you feeling lighter." She laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves skittering across the ground. "It's not the dance. It's knowing I've got a few folks in my corner. You marry Clara, it makes the rest bearable." Caleb's eyes softened. "You've earned that, Eleanor. More than you know." They worked together, hauling the harvest to the barn for storage. The rhythm of the task, lifting, stacking, the creak of the wagon felt like a conversation, each movement a wordless acknowledgement of trust. As they paused for water, Eleanor noticed a hesitation in Caleb's posture, a shadow crossing his face. "Something on your mind?" she asked, brushing wheat dust from her hands. He leaned against the wagon, his gaze distant. "Abigail came by yesterday before the dance. Said some things about us, about how folks are talking, saying I'm making a mistake keeping you on. Said it's bad for my standing in town." Eleanor's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "And what do you think?" He met her eyes, his voice firm. "I think they're wrong. You're the best worker I've got, and more than that, you're real. This town could use more of that." His words were a lifeline, but the weight of the town's judgment pressed harder. That afternoon, Clara invited Eleanor to help at the inn, preparing meals for a group of travelers passing through. The kitchen was warm, filled with the scent of roasting chicken and fresh bread, and Clara's chatter was a balm. "You're stirring things up, dear," she said, kneading dough with practiced hands. "Folks are starting to see you, not just Abigail's version of you." Eleanor chopped carrots, the knife's rhythm grounding her. "I hope so, Clara. But Abigail's not done. I can feel it." Clara's eyes narrowed. "She's got her claws out because you're a threat, not just to her pride, but to her hold on Caleb. They were close once before Sarah. She's never let go of that." The revelation hit Eleanor like a cold gust. Abigail's hostility wasn't just about status, it was personal. Before she could dwell on it, the kitchen door swung open, and Thomas Hargrove stepped in, his mustache twitching with a smug grin. "Miss Grayson working hard as always. Pity it's wasted on a lost cause." Clara bristled, but Eleanor spoke first, her voice sharp. "If you mean my place here, Mr. Hargrove, it's no more lost than your manners." "What do you want?" He leaned against the doorframe, unfazed. "Just a warning. Abigail's planning a town meeting tomorrow to discuss standards for newcomers. She's got half the council on her side, and they're not keen on unconventional additions to Willow Creek." Eleanor's blood ran cold, but she held his gaze. "Let them talk. I'm not here to beg for their approval." Thomas chuckled, tipping his hat. "We'll see how long that lasts." He left the door creaking shut behind him. Clara squeezed Eleanor's shoulder. "Don't let them scare you, dear. You've got more allies than you think." That evening, Eleanor walked to the river, the water glinting under the setting sun. The scent of damp moss and cedar wrapped around her, and she let herself breathe. Caleb's faith, Clara's warmth, Mary's courage, these were her anchors. But Abigail's meeting loomed a test of her place in this town. Could she face the council's judgment and prove she belonged? Or would Abigail's influence uproot her dreams before they could grow? The town hall stood at the heart of Willow Creek, its weathered clapboards glowing faintly under the overcast sky, as if bracing for the storm within. Eleanor walked toward it, her boots sinking into the muddy path, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and impending conflict. Abigail's town meeting was tonight, and the word had spread like wildfire, a discussion on standards for newcomers, a thinly veiled attack on Eleanor's presence. Her heart pounded, but she held her head high, the memory of Caleb's steady gaze and Clara's fierce encouragement fueling her resolve. She'd faced judgment before. Tonight she'd face it again, but this time she wasn't alone. Inside the hall was packed the air thick with the murmur of voices and the faint smell of lamp oil. Lanterns cast flickering shadows across the wooden benches, where townsfolk sat in clusters, some curious, others skeptical. Eleanor took a seat near the back, her green dress neatly pressed, her hands clasped to hide their trembling. Mary slid in beside her, offering a quick, reassuring smile. "You've got friends here," she whispered. "Don't let Abigail fool you into thinking otherwise." The meeting began with Abigail at the front, her voice clear and commanding, her silk dress, a stark contrast to the room's simplicity. "Willow Creek thrives on tradition," she said, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "We welcome newcomers, but they must uphold our values, refinement, respectability, and a commitment to our way of life." Her gaze landed on Eleanor, sharp as a blade. "Some arrivals, however well-meaning, simply don't fit." Whispers rippled through the crowd, and Eleanor felt the weight of their stares. Thomas Hargrove stood, his mustache twitching, as he added, "We need folks who strengthen our community, not divide it. A woman who can't meet basic expectations, say as a proper wife, risks unsettling our town's harmony." The words stung, but Eleanor rose, her voice steady, despite the knot in her chest. "If harmony means judging a person by their size or their past, then maybe Willow Creek needs a new tune. I came here to work, to build, to be part of this town. I've done nothing but prove that every day at Caleb's farm, at Clara's Inn, even at your sewing circle, Miss Turner. If that's not enough, tell me what is." A hush fell, broken only by the creak of benches. Caleb stood next, his presence commanding without effort. "Eleanor's right," he said, his voice low but firm. "This town's strength isn't in sameness. It's in people who show up, who do the work, who care. She's done more for my farm in weeks than most could in a year. If you're judging her by anything less than her heart and her hands, you're the ones who don't fit." Mary clapped, and a few others joined their applause, tentative but growing. Clara stood, her gray hair gleaming in the lantern light. "I've known Abigail her whole life, and she's got charm, but charm's not character. Eleanor's got that in spades. She's helped at my inn-fed travelers and never once complained. You want standards? Look at her." Abigail's face tightened, but she pressed on. "This isn't about one person. It's about protecting our community. We can't let just anyone change who we are." A man in the crowd, the blacksmith, spoke up. "Seems to me Eleanor's changing things for the better. My boy says she fixed a fence at Morrow's farm faster than he could. That's the kind of neighbor I want." The tide was turning, but Abigail wasn't finished. "Fine," she said, her voice icy. "Let's vote. Who believes newcomers should meet our traditional standards of appearance and station?" A few hands rose, including Thomas's, but they were fewer than Eleanor had feared. "And who thinks Eleanor Grayson's earned her place here?" Caleb asked, his eyes challenging the room. Hands shot up, Mary's, Clara's, the blacksmith's, and others more than Eleanor had dared hope. The room erupted in murmurs, some approving, others heated. Abigail's smile was brittle as she conceded, "The town has spoken. For now." She swept out, Thomas trailing her, but her parting glance promised this wasn't over. As the crowd dispersed, Caleb found Eleanor, his expression soft. "You did good tonight. They're starting to see you." She nodded, her throat tight. "Thanks to you. And them." The scent of rain followed her as she stepped outside, the first drops falling. She'd won a battle, but Abigail's resolve lingered like thunder in the distance. Would this victory hold, or was a greater challenge waiting? The rain had turned Willow Creek streets to mud by morning, each step a slog, as Eleanor made her way to Caleb's farm. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed the unease in her heart. Last night's victory at the town meeting had been a triumph, a crack in the wall of judgment that had shadowed her since arriving. Yet Abigail's parting glance lingered like a splinter, a reminder that the fight for her place in this town was far from over. Eleanor clutched her shawl, her resolve as firm as the mountains framing the horizon. She'd come too far to let one woman's spite undo her. At the farm, Caleb was repairing a gate, his hands steady despite the drizzle. The sight of his sodden jacket clinging to his broad shoulders, his face lit with quiet determination, stirred something in Eleanor, a warmth that went beyond gratitude. He looked up, his smile breaking through the gray morning. "You're a sight for sore eyes," he said, brushing rain from his brow. "After last night, I figured you might take a day to rest." "Rest," she laughed, shaking water from her bonnet. "I'd rather work than let Abigail think she scared me off. What's on for today?" He handed her a hammer, pointing to a row of fence posts battered by the storm. "We'll shore these up before the ground gets too soft. You up for it?" "Always," she said, her voice steady. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of hammer on wood, a counterpoint to the rain's soft patter. Each swing felt like a declaration, "I am here, I belong." Caleb's presence beside her was a quiet strength, his occasional glances carrying a warmth that made her pulse quicken. She wondered if he felt it too, this unspoken pull, but pushed the thought aside. Work first, dreams later. Midday brought a visitor, Mary, her cloak soaked but her eyes bright. "Eleanor, you were incredible last night," she said, handing over a small bundle of cornbread wrapped in cloth. "The town's talking, and not all of it's bad. You're changing minds." Eleanor took the bread, its warmth seeping into her hands. "Thanks, Mary. But Abigail's not done. I can feel it." Mary's expression darkened. "You're right. I overheard her at the store this morning talking to Thomas. They're planning something, a petition to the town council claiming you're disrupting Willow Creek's harmony. They're targeting Caleb too, saying his support for you is dividing the town." Caleb's hammer paused, his jaw tight. "Let them try. I've got no patience for their nonsense, and neither should you, Eleanor." But the news settled like a stone in her chest. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Caleb, his farm, his standing. She'd come to Willow Creek to build a life, not to tear his apart. "Maybe I should step back," she said quietly. "I don't want your name dragged through the mud because of me." Caleb set down his hammer, stepping closer, his eyes fierce. "Don't you dare! You're not the problem, they are. This farm, this town, it's better with you here. I'm better with you here." His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Eleanor's breath caught, her heart racing at the intensity in his gaze. For a moment, the rain, the mud, the world itself faded, leaving only the two of them tethered by something deeper than friendship. She wanted to speak, to name the feeling, but fear held her back. What if she was wrong? What if this was just kindness, not love? Before she could find words, a shout broke the moment. Daniel, Mary's brother, ran up breathless. "Fire at the barn," he gasped. Someone saw smoke. Abigail and Thomas were nearby. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She and Caleb sprinted toward the barn, the acrid scent of smoke cutting through the rain. Flames licked the far wall, small, but spreading fast. Caleb grabbed buckets, shouting for Daniel to fetch help. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She plunged into the fray, hauling water from the nearby trough, her dress soaked and heavy. Together they fought the fire, their movements desperate but synchronized, until townsfolk arrived to help douse the flames. As the last embers died, Eleanor stood panting, her face smudged with soot. The barn was saved, but the damage was clear. Someone had set this fire. Abigail Thomas. The truth was a shadow, elusive but looming. Caleb touched her arm, his voice low. "You didn't back down. Not even from this." She met his eyes, her heart blazing brighter than the fire. But as the crowd dispersed, whispers of sabotage swirled. Would they uncover the culprit, or would this act of malice drive a deeper wedge between Eleanor and Willow Creek? The dawn broke over Willow Creek with a fragile clarity, the sky a pale blue, streaked with clouds that promised no more rain. Eleanor stood by the scorched barn, the faint scent of charred wood lingering despite the morning's breeze. Her hands were blistered from yesterday's frantic effort to save Caleb's barn, but the ache in her heart was heavier. The fire had been no accident. Whispers among the townsfolk pointed to Abigail and Thomas, though proof was as slippery as the mud under her boots. Eleanor had come to this town for a new beginning, but now, with Caleb's livelihood at stake and her own place in question, she wondered if she'd brought more trouble than hope. Caleb emerged from the farmhouse, his face etched with fatigue but resolute. The sight of him, steady as the mountains framing Willow Creek, stirred a fierce determination in her. "We'll rebuild," he said, handing her a cup of coffee, its warmth seeping into her hands. "This barn stood through worse. So have we." She nodded, her voice soft but firm. I'm not running, Caleb, but if they're coming for you because of me, I need to know I'm worth the fight. His eyes met hers unguarded and intense. You are. More than you know. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken promises. Before she could respond, Clara arrived, her face grim. Town's buzzing, she said. Abigail's called another meeting claiming the fire proves you're a danger to Willow Creek, Eleanor. She's got Thomas and a few council members backing her. They want you gone. Eleanor's stomach churned, but Caleb's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that steadied her. Let them talk, he said. We've got truth on our side. The meeting was held at noon, the town hall packed once more. The air was thick with tension, the scent of polished wood and nervous sweat mingling under the high ceiling. Abigail stood at the front, her voice sharp as she recounted the fire-painting Eleanor as a reckless outsider who'd brought chaos. Thomas nodded, adding, We can't risk more incidents. For the town's sake, she should leave. Eleanor rose, her heart pounding but her spine straight. I came to Willow Creek to build a life, not to burn one down. I fought that fire with Caleb, with Daniel, with your neighbors. If you think I'm the problem, look closer at who's fanning the flames. Her gaze locked on Abigail, unflinching. Mary stood next, her voice trembling but clear. Eleanor's no danger. She's worked harder for this town than some who've lived here all their lives. And I saw Thomas near the barn before the fire alone. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thomas's face reddened, but before he could speak, the blacksmith stood. My son saw him too, skulking with a lantern. If anyone's a threat, it's not Eleanor. The room erupted, voices clashing until Caleb's cut through, steady and commanding. Enough. This town's better than petty schemes. Eleanor's shown us what courage looks like, working, fighting, standing tall. If you can't see that, you're blind to what makes Willow Creek strong. The council voted, and the tide turned decisively. Abigail's petition failed, her influence crumbling as more townsfolk spoke for Eleanor, Clara, Daniel, even the shy schoolteacher. Thomas stormed out, his reputation tarnished, and Abigail followed her silence louder than any protest. That evening, Eleanor and Caleb walked to the river, the water glinting under the setting sun. The air was sweet with honeysuckle, the world soft and quiet. You changed this town, Caleb said, his voice low. And you changed me. She turned to him, her heart full. You gave me a chance, Caleb. That's all I needed to find my place. He took her hand, his touch warm and sure. I want more than a chance, Eleanor. I want a life with you, if you'll have me. Tears pricked her eyes, but she smiled, bold and unashamed. I will. They married in spring under the orchard's blooming trees, with Mary and Clara beaming and the town cheering. Eleanor and Caleb built a new barn, a symbol of their shared strength, and started a community fund to help newcomers find their footing. Willow Creek grew kinder, its heart opened by a woman who refused to shrink. As the sun set on their wedding day, Eleanor looked out at the town she'd made her own, Caleb's hand in hers. She'd found love not just in him, but in herself, in a community that had learned to see her. And that was a legacy worth building. If you love stories of resilience and love overcoming prejudice, please like, share, and subscribe to explore more.